Nailing down when a human being first got on the back of a horse has been a point of contention in archaeology and anthropology for quite some time. However, a group of scientists finally seem to have settled the argument, and in this show we're going to talk about how they achieved this, why the results give us a far more reliable date for the advent of horse riding, and the fact that the topic of early horse riding is not that widely talked about in the first place.
Pincer-like protrusions of the acetabular rim, or an asymmetric shape of the column femoris as connected with the two types of fem-oreo-tabular-acetabular impingement condition, were not observed. The surface is elevated and not cribrous, which rules out Allen's fossa and not clearly connected to the articular surface as typical for Poirier's facet.
Well, I think that about does it for me. Well done, scientists. That's it, I think. Thank you for watching, folks. Comments below. See you next time. Bye for now.
Oh, dear. Bonkers, isn't it? This is an astonishing piece of research. It really is. But it has to be said that the paper is drier than a cheese cracker that's been dug up from the middle of a Sahara desert. Yes,
drier than the bones that were the subject of the study. Yeah. So this, this is really a case of prehistory guys digging deeper, so you don't have to. Well, neither of us have got any background at all in osteology or anatomy or anything like that, so
that is
we'd have to admit
certain,
that getting through this one was a bit of a struggle. Nevertheless, as ever, I think it's really, really helpful to bring you why this study is so important. So understanding why that is a reliable study, and really confirms the arguments about the first and earliest horse riding, how it confirms one side of the argument and the methods it uses to do that. So everybody can have confidence in what their conclusions are, and as a basis for going forward, and the massive implications, to be able to more confidently explore, what the impact of the Yamnaya, and I've been told off for putting the emphasis on the wrong
Yamnaya,
syllable.
yes.
Yamnaya.
Yes.
The expansions, of the Yamnaya culture, both east and west, and into west into Europe. So I'll ask you, Rupert, what of this study leaps out for you? Where does it take your mind?
Well, I think it's got to be said right at the top that one of the really lovely things about this research is that what they've actually presented here is not what they were setting out to present at all. Yeah. They'd set out to do an analysis of skeletal remains, and what we're left with now with this evidence for horse riding is the fact that there has been lots of evidence for the domestication of horses for a long time. But the point is that just because you can show that a horse wore a bridle doesn't mean it was being ridden. It could have been that it was pulling a cart, for example, or there's all sorts of things. And so this is the first time that, well, they've looked at it from a completely different point of view. It's the fact that there's two organisms involved in riding a horse. One's the horse and one's the rider. And so what are the osteological stresses? What are the remains, the signs that you'll see on the bones that will show that a rider had consistently been riding a horse? Yeah. And you've got a list there, haven't you, Mike? I mean, their list of the things that they were looking for when they decided that this was something that needed analysis. Yeah. They're tick boxes are pretty damn rigorous, impressively rigorous.
Absolutely. It's 6 traits they chose to look for evidence that might indicate horse riding. You know, the pathologies that you'd expect to be caused in the human skeleton as a result of horse riding. So it's enthesial stress reactions on the pelvis and femur. Acetabular ovalization. So the femur is the top ball joint of thigh bone, and the acetabular bit is the socket. Is that the best way of putting it? You see, I told you we didn't have any expertise in anatomy enough.
Yeah, let's not get picky. It's good enough.
Yeah. But ovalization, so that's the misshapenness of the socket that might result from horse riding. Femur acetabular alterations, sort of, I suppose that's a combination of the two. Bone shaft, number 4, bone shaft cross-sectional shape, alteration of the cross-sectional shape of the bone shaft, I guess in the thigh bone mostly. Number 5, stress-induced vertebral degeneration. So that's pathologies of the spine you might expect from horse riding. And number 6, trauma by accident. And each skeleton was scored on these six traits. Now, I'm going to put a rider on this. Oh, sorry, I have to forgive the pun there.
Do you know what? I hadn't even noticed.
Yeah, no, the rider I want to put, before we go any further, I want to put a rider on this. It is that this paper has been a bit of a gateway drug to this whole area. And suddenly it's dawned on us, I'm sure it's dawned on people before, that this is massively important as far as the human history is concerned, you know, and the changes that horse riding made to, well, I don't need to layer it on, but you know where I'm going. It's massive. But the fact is that this area has been contentious. Now, we haven't been introduced to this area before, and so we never done a deep dive. We haven't really read the literature on this topic about whether horse riding started 3rd millennium BC or not, or where and when horse riding began. We have been dependent, after reading this paper, for supplementary information to other people that have gone before us, and we have to thank in this regard Mr. Dan Davis massively.
Yes, Dan Davis does wonderful work. He really does. What's the name of Dan's website?
Dan Davis. I think if you do a search for Dan Davis history on YouTube, you'll find him. But Dan Davis is a fiction writer, but he writes fiction based on unerring research into prehistory, academic research. So hats off to him, and he does great YouTube videos. About these different cultures in
very,
prehistory,
very
Bronze Age,
informative
etc.
stuff.
So we are indebted to him for some of the information that we've picked up and the flavour we've picked up of where researchers in this area has gone in recent years. So this, forgive us, it'll be a sort of rather free-ranging conversation rather than a nailed down exploration of the subject.
Well, there's some particularly interesting points really to come out generally, because where horsemanship has arisen in the archaeological record before, particularly from there are no depictions of it before 2100 BC. and then pretty much all the depictions for the next 1,000 years from that point are Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Egyptian, Assyrian, that, all that region. There was nothing before that. So whilst they were finding evidence for domesticated horses, I mean, it's been known for a long time that horses were, in the north and northeast, horses were kept for milk and meat. But riding was not one of those things that cropped up back then, was it? But the whole thing around horse domestication is interesting because, as has been pointed out by other people, the thing is that in order to domesticate horses, in order to corral horses, you need to do that from horseback, really. It's the only way to significantly manage horses is if you're on the back of one. Not least of all because either that's the only way you can chase them, or two, that's something that is still used worldwide today, is that animals are less frightened of you if you're on the back of a horse, because you've got 4 legs. You're sitting on the back of a herbivore. And so there's kind of hints along the way. It's not evidence that they were riding horses. It's just the probability that they must have been in order to have accomplished some of the things that they accomplished.
I think, just to return to the paper, though, I think it's important that we just nail some aspects of the study so people get that, how this sways the argument one way. And the numbers involved, the basic numbers here, they have a study of 217 individuals from burials in that area, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, etc. Of those 217, and again reiterating that it was not the purpose of the original study to make this determination about horse riding in prehistory, but that the examination of the data results in some individuals from this 217 individual study marking very high on those particular traits. Some very high in dates, some in a moderate level, but enough, without doing a deep dive into their methodology and everything. But there's enough here to be able to say with confidence that people were riding horses round about the mark of 3000 BCE, and if not before. And after, saying the bit about before, there's one individual in the study which is, into the 5th millennium BC, i.e. before 4000 BC. But there's only the one in the study. So, like from good Hungary, scientists and archaeologists, they tend to chop off the outliers as far as making claims as the earliest horse riding is concerned. But I find that very, very tantalizing myself. So, yes, sorry, Rupert, you were saying there's a whole spread of dates that we could begin with, and earliest horse riding has been pushed back by other methods, I should say. Let's start. What can we say about the Bataille culture to begin with, which seems to be the earliest?
Yes, and I think the lovely thing about the Bataille culture is that it's something that we can talk about and then throw away.
Yes.
Because the Bataille culture from what is now Kazakhstan, basically, and they had domesticated horses apparently before everybody else. So we're talking about 3700 BC. So that's, getting on 6,000 years ago. And so they're domesticated horses. They were certainly using them for milk and meat, extensively for milk and meat. And there is a degree of evidence that they were riding horses there as well. The issue about the bow tie culture is that when it came to doing a full genetic analysis, a DNA analysis on the people, it turns out that these people disappeared completely. There are no descendants from those people anywhere on the planet. None at all. So they didn't pass on, they haven't disseminated from that region. They then went back, the researchers then went back and did an analysis on the horses, specifically to see where their descendants may have spread to. And they were astonished to find out that, those horses didn't spread anywhere. The only genetic relationship they have is to Przewalski's horse, which is now, it's extinct in the wild anyway. There's only
right. Okay.
Anyway, so that's the point.
Yeah.
That the Botai people, the horses that they were riding were not like these glorious beasts that we see today. These these are small, kind of pot-bellied. Oh, that's harsh. Sorry, Przewalski's horses, but short, stocky, robust little animals. Not majestic creatures that we think of. So, I mean, they'd have been great for trundling around on the steppe, though, wouldn't they? These little, like tanks, really. But so that's the interesting point about the bow tie. The people disappeared completely, and the horses have no bearing on the horses that we see around the world today. So basically, whilst the bow tie might have been the earliest domesticators and riders of horses, it has no bearing on the riding of horses anywhere else. Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, so like they're contained in a little thing themselves, but it's tantalising, of course, that I suppose it's the availability of horses, isn't it? And I think we've got to think about people on the plains, on the steppe, on the Eurasian steppe, with the availability of horses, and obviously they are a huge resource, and the people that can command them, corral them, and master the husbandry of them are going to survive pretty darned well. When I think about the Batai, when I think of, I was going to mention another horse riding culture who by some have been labelled as the first horse riders, and that's the Sredni Stog culture, which seems to, geographically, sandwiched right next door to where the expansion of the Yamnaya people came from. So it's all happening in that area, and I don't know. It's a grey area for us. And other people seem to be quite distinct about this, and other people are, quite contrary about this. So where do you go? So it's another great search, isn't it? The Sredni Stog culture.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously so much reading and research that we could do, but it's another one of those aspects of modern laboratory techniques changing our understanding of so much. So, there have been so many arguments raging for a long time about when the domestication of horses and the riding of horses actually got going. And there are experts in the field, particularly with regard to military history, who they don't really accept early dates for riding because there's no evidence of horses in battle until you get to around 2000 BC and significantly later, from that point onwards. And so, there's this thinking that, well, people would have been using them for fighting, but then that presupposes an awful lot of things. That the point is that getting on a horse seriously extends your range, just your ability to move around a tricky landscape.
Yeah.
The distance that you could cover in a day, it changes everything. I don't really see that the fact that they weren't used aggressively, I don't think that dismisses the probability.
The overall impression that I get, and I think, whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but from my point of view, what I like to impress is this idea of a symbiotic relationship with this vast resource of horses, wild horses on the plain. And I think it's analogous to the Sami people of Norway and the Nordic areas and their relationship with reindeer. Before the snowmobile came along and other devices for keeping up with the herd and corralling the herd, they were riding other reindeer.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty amazing feat. But whatever wild herd, if they're fleet of foot, you've got to be able to keep up with them. So, the first people that got on the horse didn't give them power over other people. It gave them power over herding, over being able to corral these animals and manage them as a resource, both for meat and milk and their hides. Forget that. And certainly in the case of the Batai, it was totally horse oriented. That was their economy. Which is probably why they disappeared. When they disappeared rather quickly and without trace. When you're singularly associated with one crop, one source of food that you completely depend on, if something changes, boom. Or if there are challenges from outside your area, I don't know. But that's my idea of what was going on. And that's my idea of pretty much what was going on with the Yamnaya as well. Maybe, just maybe, and it was all going swimmingly, and they're keeping themselves to themselves until they invented the wheel. Which has been proposed that Yamnaya were responsible for the wheel. Now that's a different game. It's not the horse particularly, but it's the wheel and cart, which we know they had, which changes the game completely.
That raises another interesting point about all of this, though, and that's that as soon as you talk about wagons, particularly, there's a glorious wagon that they dredged up from a lake in Armenia. It's a massively heavy thing that you could only have used that with cattle, big cows pulling big wagons. So using horses, which are obviously not as tough as cattle. So what sort of vehicles would they have been using to be pulled by horses? Or would they have had multiple horses? The width of the wagons doesn't suggest that you would have had the horses abreast, because there's no evidence for... before the invention of the chariot, for example, there's no evidence for being able to have horses, say, 4 abreast, that kind of thing. It's not to say they couldn't do it, but there's no evidence for that. It's an intriguing thing, isn't it? Wagons with cattle and wagons with horses.
Well,
just small carts with horses. Yeah, why not? Well,
here's another interesting thing. Of course, the reason that controversy rages is because there is no physical evidence for in that there is no tack in the archaeological record. Anything that tack would have been made of, a blanket for a saddle, the leather, whatever for reins, etc., rope, saddles, that completely disappeared. There's no evidence of that kind at all, which is why studies like this are so important.
Absolutely, but the only things that they do have are the bone pieces that they would have been on the outside of the horse's face. So basically the leather thong would have gone through or whatever. So they've got plenty of items that are those bone pieces, which, again, some people dismiss as being, well, they're just tools of another sort, but they do look like...
Robert Drews does.
Robert Drews doesn't.
I should mention by name, actually, the guy responsible for the major study of teeth, of horse teeth, for evidence of wear and tear, likely from the wearing of a bridle, David Anthony. And there are a couple of talks by David Anthony available on YouTube, in which he does a deep dive into his own research and papers on evidence for horse riding in horses' teeth. What I was going to say was, though, you don't necessarily need tack to be able to ride a horse. Bareback riding, is a thing, obviously, and the first riders would have been bareback riders, of course. But you need tack to be able to draw a cart.
Yes, you do.
Just a thought, I don't know where it takes us, but just a thought, yeah.
Certainly. No, that's an interesting point, actually, you raised there, that we do have this eternal problem of would stuff have been made, so pre-Bronze Age, would stuff have been made from completely degradable materials, leather, for example. So could there have been tack that has just long since disappeared? But having tack that's strong enough for an animal to pull a wagon.
Without further investigations down that line, though, I suppose it's a dead end. But I thought it was an interesting little topic worthy of exploration there. After all this, though, I'm left with the overall impression, contrary to the impression that may have been left on our thumbnail, with Yamnaya being these marauding raiders using horses to expand their, dare I say it, this... that you could make the big mistake, I suppose, of the Yamnayan Empire. Such was their expansion to the east and west. But far, far from it. This is the impression I'm left with, is far, far from that, and is much more along the lines of a people suddenly kind of liberated by the wheel. And you haven't got these people on horseback attacking their neighbours and expanding that way, but the wheel and the wagon, just by huge factors, expanding their range. And when a certain group of people has an advantage, they are by just organic day-to-day living, they're going to have an advantage over anybody else that might be living adjacent to or in the area they're expanding into.
And a very good thing to bring up there, on the back of what you're saying about them not necessarily being these warmongering people that they've been described as, is that if you actually look at Yamnaya skeletal remains, that it seems there was very little interpersonal violence within their own culture. So you look at any other skeletal remains across, particularly going in, from Eastern Europe coming into Western Europe, that violence was just ubiquitous. People staving each other's heads in all the time. And yet, amongst the Yamnaya, they seem to be a very peaceful people. So this whole notion of them destroying people wherever they went, it's something that there are more theories now about that being plague-related, that these people were coming in, taking up space, if you like, taking up the space that was freed up by peoples being completely wiped out by the plague. So,
oh yes, I'd forgotten about that. That's actually, there is quite strong evidence for that as a reason for the displacement of peoples, for sure. So I think that's the impression that I'd like to leave people with. I don't know about you, Rupert. It's, just taking with a very, very big pinch of salt this pervading idea, this pervading meme of people who ride horses suddenly become warriors, and laying havoc in all the regions round about. I think it's just the natural advantage that horse riding and the traction maybe that enables, that is the driver for the expansion.
Do you know what? If this isn't going off on one, I think it's worth pointing out as well that
it is. It will be.
It will be. There are plenty of bits of film that you can see on YouTube as well.
Yeah,
where,
for sure.
Where monkeys have been filmed jumping on the back of pigs, wild pigs, and just galloping off, clearly just having a riot of a time. And I think that if any primate can get its kicks out of jumping onto the back of something and seeing how fast it'll run, I don't think humans would have been any different. We've probably been trying to do it for a very long time. That's what I think anyway.
Okay, well, is that it? Is that where we're going to end
that's
monkeys riding pigs?
Excuse me. Yes.
Monkeys riding pigs. Quite all right. Yeah. I have to say, I mean, if you do a search on YouTube, there's plenty of people gone to great lengths to portray people on horseback with swords and clubs and maces doing horrible things to other people. But
obviously it's a thing. It does distinctly, being higher up, it does give you that advantage. There's no avoiding that, which is why people would have been using horses for warfare for a long time. But that doesn't alter the fact that it must have started from a domestic rationale.
But with the horses they had, they wouldn't have been that much higher up.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Not that we're greater experts on horses. Listen, Rupert, have we covered the bases here?
I think we have.
But like we say, that was a sort of free-ranging conversation around the subject rather than being an informative, this is the way it is, because that is the extraordinary thing about this whole area, that it is so important to the whole subject of human history. And yet, although there have been books written about this subject, if you look at the general topic of human prehistory, I mean, crikey, I've got a big book here, lots of pages in it, covering the whole of human prehistory, says it, the human past, all, wrapped up in a very excellent tome there, 4th edition, no less. Horse riding, a couple of paragraphs.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And I'm just wondering if the reason for that is that there has been so much controversy, and so it's very hard for people to be emphatic, to be certain of the area. So that's why people are a bit reluctant to put it in black and white in general.
Very probably, and just underscores really why this research is just so important, because it has proven categorically that people were riding horses 3,300 years ago. It's and brought up the thing, with if you include the outliers. Sorry, I said 3,300 years ago. I meant 3,300 years BC.
BC, yeah.
Bit different.
But if you include the outliers, pushes it back even further, to before 4,000
with the outliers,
BC.
it's just astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope that's left you with a sort of a gateway. like I said, this study has been a gateway drug for us looking at but appreciating how very important this is, not in terms of genetic expansion, but also in terms of the expansion of language as well, and the influence on the language that we speak today.
That in itself is a can of worms, which we shall open at some point.
Yeah. Gosh, we are so daring. We boldly going as ever. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope for you it provides sort of a bit of a gateway for looking further into this, the whole area of horses. With that, we will say ta-ra for now. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Do have a look at our Patreon page and also the page Buy Me a Coffee, where we're raising funds for extraordinary, I have to say it, though I say it myself, epic new series we're going to be doing called GÖBEKLI TEPE to Stonehenge. Filming on that will start towards the end of this year, but we still got a bit of funds to raise. Please have a look at the Buy Me a Coffee page. That's it. That's all I've got to say. That's all I've got. How about you, Rupert?
Yeah, no, it's all I've got, and thank you for hanging in there. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
And
cheers.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.